Welcome to the 700 Club. For today's top headlines, let's go over to the CBN News Desk.
Gordon Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blasted the indictment announced against him late Thursday. It's the first time in Israel's history a sitting prime minister has been indicted. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the announcement puts the political future of Israel's longest-serving prime minister in doubt and pushes Israel's political landscape into even more turmoil.
Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit announced indictments against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in 3 separate cases for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. He called it a sad day for Israel.
A day in which the Attorney General decides to serve an indictment against a seated Prime Minister for serious crimes of corrupt governance is a heavy and sad day for the Israeli public and for me personally.
An emotional and defiant Netanyahu defended himself.
Tonight, we're witnessing an attempted coup against the Prime Minister, using false accusations and a tainted and biased investigation process.
Netanyahu called for a separate commission to investigate the charges and said the investigators were not hunting for the truth, but hunting him. He vowed to remain in office.
I won't let the lie win. I will continue to lead the country according to the law, exactly as written. I will continue to lead the country with responsibility, with dedication, and with care for the security and the future of all of us, and for our country, and for democracy, and for the rule of law, and for justice. We need to do one thing. We need at last to investigate the investigators.
After the announcement, some Israelis from the right and the left took to the streets.
All the attorney and the justice system, they belong to the left. But the left, they anti-democracy. They see that after election after election, they lose, Bibi win the election. So what they make? They make investigation.
I'm here because today the Prime Minister of Israel has been indicted for bribery and breach of trust, and he must resign his office today, tonight.
After years of investigations, Netanyahu will have his day in court. Despite the indictments, Netanyahu remains prime minister until the results of his trial, which could take months or even years. If he is convicted, he would have to step down. It comes at a critical time politically for Israel. Both Benny Gantz, the leader of the Blue and White Party, and Netanyahu have been unable to form a government. Now, for the first time in Israel's history, the members of the Knesset will have 21 days to choose a prime minister. If they can't, Israelis will go to the polls in several months. Whatever happens, Israel is facing one of its most uncertain times politically in its history. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Here at home, evangelist Franklin Graham says Chick-fil-A's CEO Dan Cathy assured him the fast food chain is not caving to pressure from LGBTQ groups. News that Chick-fil-A is ending donations to the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes sparked outrage among many Christians and conservatives. Those organizations required their members to adhere to biblical marriage. Chick-fil-A has been under extreme pressure from the LGBTQ community since Cathy publicly spoke out against gay marriage 7 years ago. In a Facebook post, Graham says he called Cathy, who told him Chick-fil-A remains committed to Christian values and is not bowing down to demands from the LGBTQ community. In Washington, the House Intelligence Committee wrapped up its public hearings Thursday and the Democrats' push to impeach President Trump. Now the issue is expected to go to the House Judiciary Committee next month, and if the House votes to impeach the president, the Senate would then hold a trial. Abigail Robertson brings us this look at yesterday's testimony and the president's response.
2 weeks of public testimony wrapped up Thursday after Fiona Hill, a former National Security Council Russia expert, made it very clear she was not there to play games.
I have no interest in advancing the outcome of your inquiry in any particular direction except toward the truth.
Hill raised serious concerns about the involvement of President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, in Ukraine foreign policy, adding this description of him from her former boss, National Security Advisor John Bolton.
Rudy Giuliani was a hand grenade that was going to blow everyone up.
Calling Giuliani's smear campaign against Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch shameful.
He was clearly pushing forward issues and ideas that would, probably come back to haunt us. And in fact, I think that that's where we are today.
And she recounted a meeting with Ukrainian officials where EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland laid out conditions for a White House meeting after getting directives from Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney.
Ambassador Sondland leaned in basically to say, well, we have an agreement that there will be a meeting if specific investigations are put underway.
Prompting Bolton to advise her to take this message to lawyers.
You tell Eisenberg, Ambassador Bolton told me, that I am not part of this whatever drug deal that Mulvaney and Sondland are cooking up.
Ukraine diplomat David Holmes also gave his account of a phone conversation he overheard between President Trump and Ambassador Sondland.
When the president came on, he sort of winced and held the phone away from his ear.
A conversation he describes as quite memorable.
So you heard President Trump ask Ambassador Sondland, is he going to do the investigation?
Yes, sir.
Adding after the conversation, Sondland told him Trump doesn't really care about Ukraine, just big stuff.
I asked him, well, what kind of big stuff? We have big stuff going on here, like a war with Russia. And he said, no, big stuff like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani is pushing.
President Trump cast doubt on Holmes' testimony, tweeting, "Never have I been watching a person making a call and been able to hear or understand a conversation." Democrats likely have the votes to impeach the president, but after 9 witnesses testified publicly, the question remains, how is this playing out in the court of public opinion? Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
The hearings don't appear to have changed any minds. Polls show the public, or many minds, I should say, polls show the public is almost evenly split about impeaching the president. While Congress is sharply divided along party lines on impeachment, Republicans and Democrats agreed on a key issue this week, overwhelmingly voting for a bill in both the Senate and the House that strongly supports freedom and democracy in Hong Kong, as the protests are still underway. But China is promising what it calls tough countermeasures against the U.S. if President Trump signs the bill. Gary Lane has that story.
Members of Congress sent a powerful signal to China Thursday by standing with the pro-democracy protesters of Hong Kong. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi.
If America does not speak up for human rights in China because of commercial issues, we lose all moral authority to speak about human rights anywhere in the world.
23 protesters surrendered to police and left Hong Kong Polytechnic University Thursday after the worst anti-government violence since Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests began.
The protests have continued because the people of Hong Kong see what's coming. They see the steady effort to erode the autonomy and their freedoms.
The United States has long stood as a beacon of freedom and a country that supports and calls out to those who are demonstrating for their rights. We need to be a more forceful and effective voice in Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act is more than just symbolic. Government officials responsible for violating human rights in Hong Kong could be hit with tough sanctions, including bans on their visa and freezing of their assets in U.S. banks. Another bill approved by Congress suspends the sale of munitions to Hong Kong police. Meeting with former Defense Secretary William Cohen in Beijing Thursday, China's foreign minister said the U.S. move is a stark interference in China's internal affairs. But protesters say police have killed some of them, like this demonstrator who was shot point blank in the chest last week. Hong Kong police have also reportedly sprayed chemical-laced water on pro-democracy protesters. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy says China President Xi Jinping is quickly becoming a pariah on the world stage.
He is destroying one of the economic jewels of the world, but certainly one of the economic jewels of China.
Andrew Duncan is co-producer of a Netflix documentary on Hong Kong's umbrella movement. On this week's episode of the CBN News Channel program The Global Lane, he said President Trump needs to sign the bill, despite the potential threat it may pose to a U.S.-China trade deal.
But we've yet to hear from the President of the United States, who needs to firmly speak out in defense of democracy, in my opinion, and firmly speak out in support of Hong Kong's rights under the joint resolution.
Although news reports say the president will sign the bill, the White House won't say if he will. Gary Lane, CBN News.